All right, welcome to this explainer. We're about to do something really cool. We're going to take a massive cinematic zoom right into literally the most complex object in the known universe. Yep, the human brain. We are going to explore exactly how this marvel works, starting from its grand architecture all the way down to the tiny microscopic chemical sparks that actually create your thoughts, your memories, and honestly, your entire identity. Let's get right into it. Okay, check this out. The human brain weighs in at just about 1.5 kilograms. That is what? A mere 2% of your total body weight? Tiny, right? But here is the crazy part. It is an absolute powerhouse. Sitting right there inside your skull, it is casually consuming a staggering 20% of your body's total oxygen and energy at all times. Like even when you're just sitting there resting, your brain is burning through a massive amount of glucose just to keep the lights on and maintain its intrinsic functions. To understand how it manages all this energy, we've got a 5-part journey today. 1. The 3-pound supercomputer. 2. Mapping the brain's geography. 3. The cellular workforce. 4. Sparks and chemical handshakes. And finally, 5. The architecture of memory. Kicking things off with Section 1, the 3-pound supercomputer. So if you look at the brain as a whole, it's broadly divided into 4 main regions. Down at the base, you've got the brainstem. That's handling the absolute vitals, like your heartbeat and your breathing. Right behind that is the cerebellum, which is constantly fine-tuning your physical coordination so you don't trip over your own feet. Moving up a bit, the diencephalon acts as this master sensory relay, regulating basic homeostatic stuff like hunger and sleep. And then, crowning the whole thing, is the big one, the cerebrum. That's where all your high-level cognition, voluntary movement, and memory live. Moving right along to Section 2, mapping the brain's geography. You know that wrinkled, folded outer layer of the cerebrum you always see in pictures? That's the cerebral cortex, and its real estate is actually split up into 4 highly specialized lobes, each processing different aspects of reality. Each one of these lobes has a very specific day job. Your frontal lobe is basically the CEO. It handles executive action, problem solving, and speech. Then you have the parietal lobe processing touch and body position. On the sides, your temporal lobe is hard at work right this second, helping you comprehend the words I'm saying. And finally, all the way at the back, your occipital lobe is busy translating the visual data you're seeing in this explainer. It's like a perfectly synchronized team. Now, all 4 of these lobes are mirrored across the 2 halves of your brain, and they've got their own quirks, right? The left hemisphere is typically the dominant one for language, speech, writing, and abstract thought. The right hemisphere, on the other hand, usually takes the lead when it comes to visuospatial reasoning and imagery. But here's the thing. They don't work in silos. They're constantly chattering back and forth through this massive, thick bundle of white matter fibers called the corpus callosum. They share all this data instantly to give you one seamless, unified experience of the world around you. Okay, let's zoom in further for Section 3, the cellular workforce. Get this. The human brain contains roughly 100 billion neurons. 100 billion. To put that astronomical number into perspective, that is actually more than the number of stars in the entire Milky Way galaxy. It's insane. These neurons are the primary processing units of the brain, completely responsible for generating the electrical signals that carry messages to and from literally every single part of your body. But here's a little twist. For the longest time, neuroscience was totally obsessed with those famous neurons, the electrical stars of the show. But there is a crucial duality here. Meet the unsung heroes, glial cells. Glia provide the structural support, the nutrients, the insulation, and the immune defense that make the neuron's electrical signaling even possible. Seriously, without glial cells, neurons just wouldn't survive. They'd be toast. And actually, glial cells have way more cellular diversity than neurons do. Think of them like a bustling city workforce. First, you have astrocytes. These star-shaped cells act like a hyper-efficient catering service, shuttling nutrients directly from your blood to the neurons. Then you've got oligodendrocytes in the central nervous system and Schwann cells in the peripheral. They're the insulation crew, wrapping your neural wiring in myelin, which dramatically speeds up the electrical signals. And finally, microglia, the dedicated security and sanitation team, constantly roaming around to clear out pathogens and debris. Getting even more microscopic now with Section 4, sparks and chemical handshakes. This sequence breaks down a process I absolutely love, called the spark and handshake. Basically, information traveling inside a single neuron moves as a quick electrical impulse, an action potential. But when that electrical signal reaches the end of the line, it hits a literal roadblock, a microscopic gap called a synapse, measuring just 20 to 50 nanometers across. So how does the signal cross the void? Well, the electrical spark triggers the release of chemical messengers known as neurotransmitters. These chemicals float across that tiny gap and bind to receptors on the very next neuron. It's literally a chemical handshake passing the message along.
And the type of message being sent, that completely depends on which neurotransmitter is doing the shaking. You've got glutamate, which is your brain's ultimate green light. It's excitatory, telling the next neuron, yes, fire. Then there's GABA, the brain's main red light, telling it to quiet down. Throw in dopamine, which drives your sense of reward and motivation, and serotonin, which heavily influences your mood and anxiety levels, and you get this incredibly complex, perfectly balanced network of on and off switches dictating your every single move.
And finally, that brings us to Section 5, the architecture of memory. The absolute key here is this concept called synaptic plasticity. Basically, synapses can physically strengthen or weaken over time depending on how much you use them. Think of it like a path through a dense forest. The very first time you walk it, it's tough, right? But the more you walk that exact same path, the more defined and easy to travel it becomes. That is the biological bedrock of all learning. It proves that your brain isn't just a static computer. It's physically rewiring itself every single day based on your experiences. Now, in memory hubs like the hippocampus, this plasticity is controlled by some very specific receptors on the receiving end of that synapse. On one hand, you have AMPA receptors. These are the fast-acting workhorses. They pop open immediately when glutamate arrives, giving a quick electrical signal. But then you have the NMDA receptors. These guys are the molecular gatekeepers. They are VIP only. They only open up if a signal is really strong or repeated a bunch of times. When they finally do open, they let calcium flood into the cell, which triggers a huge cascade of changes that physically builds more receptors, locking in that lasting synaptic change. So, when those chemical handshakes happen over and over again, the physical connection between those two neurons grows wider, stronger, and far more efficient. This phenomenon is exactly how the human brain works to remember things. In fact, it is the exact literal mechanism of how you are remembering the information from this explainer right now. Your synapses are physically altering their own shape to store what we're talking about. How cool is that? We've zoomed all the way from this grand 3-pound wrinkled organ down to microscopic receptors managing a tiny 20-nanometer gap. And honestly, it leaves us with a pretty profound question to chew on. If every single memory you cherish, every skill you've ever mastered, and every emotion you feel is just rooted in the strengthening and weakening of chemical handshakes, is human consciousness and personality really just the sum of these molecular sparks? It's kind of a wild, beautiful thought to take with you as you go about your day, putting that incredible 3-pound supercomputer in your head to work.